All right, so for lesson 2, for the in-person students, this will be the second half of day 1, and for online students, this should be day 2. We're going to be talking about safety and lab safety and safety data sheets and everything related to that. All right, so if you go into Canvas, you should see the first thing you want to do is the lesson 2 check-in. So make sure you go in there, answer that. It's one question, shouldn't be bad. And then open up the PowerPoint in the page on safety. And this is what you should get. All right, so we'll go through it. Every time we do notes like this, I'll put up the PowerPoint for you guys to look at as we go through it. I always thought that was helpful for me when I was a student, so I'm going to let y'all have that as a resource. Okay? So, first thing we're going to talk about is safety data sheets. So these are what tell you what the dangers are for every chemical that we're going to use in lab. All right. They used to be called MSDS, which is Material Safety Data Sheets. They've been shortened to just Safety Data Sheets. They used to have this little color-coded triangle that told you about the different hazards. One was health hazard, was the blue. The red was fire. The yellow was reactability. And then the white was just like a general hazard level. That's been gone. That's out the window now. So if you have seen this before in your other science classes, you can forget about it because it's not what everyone uses anymore. We've all shifted over now to what's called the globally harmonized system. And what this does is it lets you know the hazards of a material even if you don't speak English, because everything is based off of pictograms, these little pictures that tell you what to worry about. So this is an example of what you'll see on all the chemicals we use now. All right. So the pictograms, there's 9 of them that are commonly used. And we're going to talk about each of them individually, but here's just a general overview. You've got the flame over the circle, just the flame, the exploding bomb, the gas cylinder, the skull and crossbones, a corrosion symbol, health hazard symbol, environmental hazard, and then just the exclamation mark. And we'll talk about each one means as we go through them. So the first one we're going to talk about is a class of chemicals called oxidizers. That's the flame over the circle. And what this means is that they will oxidize other compounds. They're very reactive with a lot of other chemicals. They're not always flammable by themselves, but they can make fires worse because when they react with things, they release extra oxygen into the air, which, if you know anything about fire, one of the main things is that it needs oxygen to thrive. So if you've got a reaction going on that's pumping out extra oxygen, it's just going to make any fire you do have worse. So that's one of the dangers with these. Another thing with oxidizers is you don't want to store them near other chemicals because they can react and ruin your supply of other chemicals just by, being near each other. All right, the next one is the flame, which you probably could have guessed these are the flammable chemicals. So if you ever see this on a compound that we're working with, on the bottle or the label or whatever, you want to be careful to keep it away from open sources of flame or sparks. So you don't want to be handling it next to your Bunsen burner or anything like that. This can also be put as a warning on self-igniting chemicals, which are ones that can just ignite spontaneously or when exposed to light or a heat source or anything like that, even if there's not an actual ignition source like a spark or a flame. All right, and this applies to not only liquids, but it can be like solids, powders, gases, even some metals are considered flammable. So pay attention if you see this one, you know what to avoid. All right, the explosives symbol is this little bomb with the shrapnel and stuff flying out of it. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's the warning for chemicals that can cause reactions that will damage their surroundings. So you especially don't want to be doing this if you're using chemicals that have this symbol on them. You're going to be doing it with some kind of barrier between you and the reaction. A face shield, or do it inside a fume hood or something like that, where if it does explode, it's not going to send shards of broken glassware, shrapnel flying at you that can be dangerous. They'll also put this on those self-igniting chemicals we talked about earlier. All right, this little air cylinder, this is going to be put on anything that is stored under pressure at least 29 psi. So even if the chemical itself isn't harmful, like if you've got like a scuba tank that just has oxygen and nitrogen in it, it will have this symbol on it because it's stored under high pressure, which means that if that tank gets ruptured, it can cause all kinds of issues with a big pressure release that can be potentially dangerous. So this doesn't have to do so much with the chemical itself, but just with the way that it is stored. All right, this one here, the skull and crossbones. Again, you guys probably could have guessed what this means. This is acute toxicity. So what that means is if you are exposed to this just one time, it can cause you to get really sick or die just from that one-time exposure. It doesn't have to be prolonged over a long period of time or anything like that. One mistake and this can cause problems. So if you look at your like chemicals underneath your sink, if you have any for cleaning your bathroom or something like that, they might have the skull and crossbones on them, because if you ingest that or get it in your eyes or something like that, it can cause issues right away. So these are ones you've got to be careful about how you handle. We probably won't use any that have this symbol on them. It's a little bit too dangerous for our purposes, but just keep an eye out. This is one we will use. You guys will see this throughout the year. This is a symbol for corrosion. All right, so you can see here the little droplets are eating into whatever material they land on or eating into this person's hand or skin. What this means is that it'll burn you basically. This is your strong acids, your strong bases, anything that if it gets spilled on you will cause a burn type of reaction. All right, and it can also be chemicals that will destroy other materials by eating through them. So we will use acids this year. We will use strong bases. So this is one you guys have got to keep an eye out for. All right, this one where it's got the little symbol underneath this person's chest is the health hazard symbol. This is ones that aren't going to cause immediate death or sickness to you if you get exposed to it one time. But over the course of, if you work with it for a long time and have chronic exposure, which means over and over again every day, even in little tiny quantities, they can build up in you and cause all kinds of problems, from causing mutations to causing cancer. They can be carcinogens. They can have an effect on your respiratory system, your reproductive system, all kinds of different problems that you honestly just don't want to deal with. So you've got to be careful if you're going to be using these over a long period of time, not to inhale or eat or drink or ingest or, even have it come into contact with your skin over and over again, or it can cause some issues. All right, this is environmental or aquatic toxicity. So these are ones that can be harmful to the environment if we don't dispose of them properly. And we probably will see this. This is one that's not required to be put on labels. All the other ones are. This one is kind of at the discretion of whoever is packaging it. So even some chemicals that don't have this on their label will have this hazard property. But I will let you guys know how to dispose of everything we do in the lab. That way we're not dumping stuff down the drain that's going to go into the storm sewers and kill all the fish in the river or something like that. And then this is kind of the catch-all. This is the general irritant symbol. So this just means something that if it comes in contact with your eyes or your skin, it can cause irritation. It can be itchy, can cause a rash, can make your eyes sting, can make you cough if you breathe it in, stuff like that. So it's not the big picture dangerous stuff like the acute toxicity or the health hazards or the corrosion that might cause burns on your skin or anything like that. This is just, be a little bit careful with it because it can cause irritating effects. All right, and then the very last slide in this PowerPoint here is this link, and if we click this, it will take us to an example of a safety data sheet. So this is what they look like. All right, they've got 16 sections. The very first section will always tell you the name. So this is for a chemical called acetaldehyde, and then it'll tell you where it was manufactured. So if you ever have questions that this doesn't answer, you can call the manufacturer, and they'll give you more info on the chemical. The pictograms we talked about are always going to be in section 2. So if we look at this one, we can see that acetaldehyde is flammable. It'll tell you that here as well. It's a flammable liquid. Keep away from heat, sparks, open flames, yada yada. It's a general irritant. It has this little catch-all exclamation point. So it can cause eye damage or irritation, serious eye irritation, it says. And then here it says it is a general health hazard as well. So here it says carcinogenicity. That means it can cause cancer. And then organ toxicity. So, this isn't one you want to mess around with. Section 3 contains different names for it. So if you hear ethyl aldehyde or acetic aldehyde, it means the same thing. It's the same chemical. It gives you its chemical formula, and it gives you the formula weight, the molecular weight. You guys don't know what that means yet. We'll get to it later in the year, but it's a useful piece of information once we know how to use it. All right, the fourth section will always be first aid measures. So if something happens, this will tell you how to deal with it. A lot of times it's going to be call Poison Control Center and get expert advice, basically. Firefighting measures, it'll tell you what type of fire extinguisher you can use, whether you have to use the special chemical fire extinguisher or if you can just use the regular one. And then the rest of these are about how to handle it, store it so it doesn't go bad or react with things around it. Section 9 is an important one because it is the physical and chemical properties, so it'll help you identify it if you don't know exactly what's in the bottle. So this says it's a colorless liquid with an intense fruity odor, and it gives you its boiling point, its melting point, and that kind of stuff as well. So that can be a useful section to know. Section 12 is ecological information. A lot of times, like we have here, it's not going to tell you anything really, because that's one that they're not required to do a lot of research into and put on the SDS sheets. But sometimes you get lucky and there is something in there. And a lot of these other sections, like section 11, just expands on what it said earlier. So in section 2, it told us that it had specific organ toxicity. And if we look down here in toxicological information, it tells us what those organs are. It says it can target your liver, your kidneys, lungs, blood, nervous system, all that. Section 13 gives you disposal methods. A lot of times, especially since most of the chemicals that we order are from this Flynn company, they have their own disposal methods that they'll reference. So this says Flynn suggested disposal method 2, and we can go look that up and it'll tell us how exactly they want us to get rid of this chemical where it won't harm anything. All right, and then the regulatory information and all this isn't really important for y'all. But that is the general overview of this safety data sheet. The most important section that you're going to look at is section 2, because that's where all of these hazards are going to be contained. So you know exactly what you're getting into when you use this type of chemical. All right, so go on and go into your Canvas. Watch the lab safety video. It's kind of a goofy video, but it goes over the main rules of lab safety. And then your last thing to do today will be to take the safety data sheet and lab safety quiz, and then you're done for the day.